Today we'll be going over how we restore our Game Boys to near factory conditions. We'll be going over how we clean the power switch, how we clean the bumper buttons and the headphone jack, how we clean cartridge ports, as well as how we deal with tiny bits of corrosion as long as it's not too bad. Let's go ahead and jump right into the video. We always start off by cleaning the power switches in our consoles. This is how we can guarantee that the console will turn on the first flick of the switch, and that adequate power is flowing through the console for your mods. If you want a more in-depth video on how to clean the power switch, we'll have one linked in the description. However, we'll go quickly over the process in this video as well. To start, we need to remove the top cover from the power switch. To do this, we use an X-Acto knife as well as leverage and a soldering iron to pry the top piece off. Once we've got the top bit of the switch off, we can then pull out the physical switch from the tracks. From here, we then take a Q-tip and cut it at an angle. We then soak the Q-tip in isopropyl alcohol before using that to clean up the majority of the material on the track. Now that the track is starting to look a little better, let's see if we can get it as close to perfect as we can. We use a small bit of sandpaper just to get the top layer of the metal back down to perfect. Once the track is cleaned, we then need to clean the actual switch. You'll have to be very delicate with this. We use a soft bristled brush and simply just brush lightly across the top of the blades to ensure that they're clean, but also not put any pressure on the switch. Once we have the small switch piece cleaned, we can then place it back into the track on the console. From there, we then have to replace the top cover and solder it back down on both sides. And that should be a cleaned power switch. After cleaning the power switch, we typically move on to the L and the R buttons. We start by removing the domes from both buttons to allow us to have access to the metal on the inside of the switches. We also go ahead and clean the two rubber domes in isopropyl alcohol in the meantime. We use a chemical called Tarnex in order to clean our L and the R buttons. It should bring the ohm reading back down to 0 for whenever we go to play, meaning that the buttons are essentially back to factory brand new. We have a longer, more detailed video about Tarnex and its uses linked in the description. But the short of it is that we need to apply the Tarnex to the buttons for no more than 10 seconds before spraying it out and flushing the buttons with isopropyl alcohol. After this, we can go ahead and test the buttons and they should be reading down to 0 ohms. We then typically move on to the headphone jack. This headphone jack is rather dirty, so it'll be rather obvious the effect that the Tarnex has on it. We start by squirting Tarnex all over the headphone jack and using a soft bristled brush to help work it into the metal. The headphone jack is a little less sensitive than the L and the R buttons, so it can be on there for a couple seconds more. You should still flush out the entire headphone jack with alcohol though, as if any Tarnex is left on the metal, it has the potential to destroy the headphone jack. Next up, let's clean the cartridge pins. On this cartridge slot, there's one pin that looks like it's starting to develop corrosion. Luckily, we're catching it early, so we can go ahead and stop the development of corrosion now. All we have to do is take a soft bristled brush and dip it in some vinegar and start to scrub the area. This will neutralize the corrosion and even make it fall off the pin. We started off with a larger brush to hit all the area and neutralize any hiding corrosion, and then we switch to a smaller brush to hit the direct point where the corrosion is located. Once we had the corrosion off, we were able to spray the entire cartridge slot with alcohol and spray it out with compressed air. This leads us to our final step. We use deoxit on essentially all the parts that we've just refurbished to ensure that they have good electrical contact. Deoxit is just an electrical contact cleaner, so we spray it directly on the cartridge pins, we spray it inside both the L and the R bumper buttons, we spray it inside of the headphone jack, We even spray some on the volume wheel and make sure we've turned the volume up and down so that it cleans all the contacts on the inside of the switch. The last and final thing that we do is we check the pads that the buttons will be pressing. If they look dirty or slightly discolored or anything like that, we use the same Q-tip method that we used on the power switch just to give them a nice clean. We want them to be nice and shiny and reflective so that when the button gets pressed, they make a good contact and immediately give a response. Last but not least, all we have to do is double check all the pins in the link port look good, and if they don't, all we have to do is hit them with a brush and clean them, and that should be the very last part of your refurbished console. It should now be ready for any mods that you want to apply, and should be ready to be built into your dream console. If you have any questions, please be sure to join our Discord link below, and check out our wiki for more content like this.